Another historical change today. Um, I have parted with the Annie McBeal series, which is a breakthrough in my life actually. I had no choice. I mean, know who is who. So this is the end. And on that occasion, I need to do another presentation. This is going to be a light one. So all those great legal brains can relax and you can listen to it or not, whichever way you prefer. I am not dressed officially. I'm just wearing my clothes that keep me warm and comfortable. These are not really the clothes of my choice because I cannot afford it. Due to my political activity, which was never a formal political activity, just a citizen one, I have ended up in a terrible crisis with what seems to be unemployability and generally with no money of my own. So it seems that the state makes my living. But this is not true, of course, because the state owes me so much money that probably it's me who owes Poland now. So after this introduction, in that informal presentation, let me introduce you to the Court of Law, to my Court of Law. This is presence that has not taken shape yet really. So this is an idea, but it has the spiritual life, which makes it alive. It might develop a bit independently, however, it is my emanation, so I am the source. And under me there is God. I always emphasize this because I believe that as Muslims do, that God can heal us and we can pass it on. This is a concept of God. I mean, the presence is real for me, but this is if we want to somehow capture it intellectually, this is the concept of God over all religions as the first source and the first cause. I created my noble queendom in 2014. Actually, in 2013, in December, I had the idea of creating my own city. I called it Agnipolis, Agnieszka and Polis. And then it started acquiring meanings. Already at the time I had the idea of Agni, the goddess of India, which takes care of the home. This is the friendly fire. And obviously there coming the Greek associations of chastity and the Roman ones with the real living person of Agnes, the Saint Agnes. And it also connects to the lamb. I happen to wear a lamb on my forearm. When I was falling as a child, my mom caught me, and I have this remembrance. So this is the overall context. It started with the royal capital city of Agnipolis, and it has been developing. And for a while I called it the noble queendom of Onestia, which was anchoring the queendom in the Roman tradition through the Roman Catholic Church. However, I have decided to come back to the first name, the origination, which is Agnipolitania. So right now this is the Agnipolitanian Court of Law. It started as the Agnipolitanian Court of Law, and as I said, it introduces the Roman thinking of law. However, with the change of the name into the Agnipolitanian, I take it from the only Roman law to the whole Elfian world, but I remain rooted in it due to my origin, this lifetime, for safety, all sorts of safety. I am aware of the caliber, so obviously I need to tread slowly and attentively. I don't have any education in the area of law, so I'm fresh. I only have some experience, including my experience with the Court of Law in Krakow, Poland. Conceptually, the Agnipolitanian Court of Law is placed within the spiritual history of humankind. So this is the thinking. There were some covenants, and there were treasons and violations of the law. There were crimes. Generally, I believe that the moral ascent is the spiritual ascent. So if we talk about spirituality, how you can grow spiritually, the essential element of it for me is morality. Not the power, not the control, but morality. Of course, a fall is a regress. There have been all sorts of developments in history, in that particular history, the spiritual history of humankind. And one of the breakthroughs definitely was the introduction of the human rights. So how do I think about human rights in that framework? I think of them as they started. The natural rights of man that is endowed with the spiritual nature originating from God. And this happens to be the definition of the human dignity. We are the children of God. We are God's creation. We are sacred. But as we know the biblical history, as soon as the man is on his own, we have in the first generation the case of Abel and Cain. And this is not a slight violation of the law. This is the law that was not defined really. But you take someone else's life. So overall, and this is murder, and overall the law has a sacred quality for me. And naturally the destination is the state of law. Now the English state has these two meanings. So on the one hand, this is a political entity the state, and the state of law for me in that meaning would be the political entity with the presence of the rule of law. If you take it to confrontation with the real life nowadays, you see how low we are. So we cannot talk about any progress in terms of our civilization. Basically, the world is criminal nowadays. And the state of law also means the condition. So this is the second meaning. So I live in the state of law. All departures from the state of law are regress. This is a regress. One of the most important fundamental problems, of course, is the constitution of the law. So we have constitutions in our states. And constitution means exactly that. Law is decided upon and established as the law. So certain thoughts create a certain order, and this is what we are to live in agreement with. So this is really the level of philosophy, because a lot comes into it, and this is philosophical. All those areas, ontology, epistemology, ethics, axiology, perhaps aesthetics too. Well, one needs to have some taste. Come in when you talk about the constitution of the law. The key concepts in legal thinking are the innocence and the guilt. And you will also see how it relates to the American execution of the law, for instance, and what happens in the American court of law. So the innocence and the guilt are definite, by which I mean they are not a matter of liking or pragmatics. That is, it is not a matter of agreement, of a compromise reached, or whatever else. This is not about how skillful you are in convincing, or whatever kinds of manipulative techniques. This is not about the evidence you can present. This is about the truth. Someone is innocent or guilty. And of course, circumstances are taken into account, but this is a different level. Now, in terms of political regimes, we have democracy, monarchy, and communism. It starts with the monarchy. The monarchy can be defined by the rule of law too. So, what are we dealing with? Is this the state of law? And when it is not, problems start. But do we really need to change the regime, the system? Now, democracy. Democracy is started with the ingredient of the rule of law as the constitutional ingredient. Constitutional not in the sense of this little book that you read, but the making. So this is there is no democracy when there is no rule of law, because this is what democracy comes from. This is the first intent. This is the raison d'être. Now communism. Communism is the party rule. So this is not, this is the party that makes the law. This is not the law that governs the party rule. By definition. Naturally totalitarian systems, by nature. Now we have a very interesting case of Russia nowadays. When Vladimir Putin announced in 2015 that the Russian constitution was to be the only constitution that will be considered legally while assessing the rights, the human rights, my thinking went in the natural direction, natural on the basis of what I had known of Russia. And as a Pole, Russia means, as I am Pole, Russia means cutting, Russia means totalitarian methods of the rule, Russia means death. Russia means supporting the takeover of power by Mao Zedong in China. So Russia means the People's Republic of China. Russia is a horror. However, we have a new perspective on Russia because we move to the European Union now, what it really is. Personally, I believe this is a new wave of communism, and it was meant to be so from the very beginning. Now we have new definitions of all that had ever been stable for us, starting in the ancient Egypt with the goddess Mat. So the goddess Mat was responsible for order, and that order included the female and the male quality as two separate ones. These are the qualities of life, human life. And this is this first norm that is being undermined nowadays by a new norm, which to people like me is totally unacceptable. No doubt about that. So these two orders of the world are confronted nowadays, and this is what creates the current war on the spiritual level. This is a historical conflict. Now, the European Union is defined by certain symbols, like the anthem. The anthem takes us to Schiller and his Ode to Joy. Ode to Joy or Ode on Joy. Anyway, if we read the text, we must see three important directions. First of all, this is Greece, not Rome. So this is the definition of Europe. Secondly, there is the axiological outline for life, joy. Pretty hedonistic if we take our ancient thinking. And thirdly, there's the forgiveness, which for a Pole immediately connects with the round table talks. We had the line drawn. So the agreement was, the accords, the agreement was that what had been, and now we have a new start. And this new start is a democracy where we share power. So there is the communist rule and there is the new rule, democracy, Poland going free. Sadly enough, this was an appearance only, and we know it for sure, for certain nowadays. There was no end of communism in Poland. There was an impression created. Actually, the communist regime has been working hard on strengthening its position, going into all areas of life, all the key areas of life. So, to start with, the judicial system, the judiciary, education, universities, academies, schools, business, mass media, and we have the new development, the fashion world, entertainment, and the fashion world. The fashion world that is totally communist and extremely powerful. All politicians want to look great. And dress best. What it means practically is that this is a false appearance of the tribunal, the European tribunal, having whatsoever concern for cutting. Because the line drawn is in the very anthem. In short, drawing the line without the moral re-establishment where the guilty are punished and the wronged are somehow re-established in life, and there are compensation issues, repairs, damages, etc. One cannot draw the line and live on. This is the spiritual history of humankind. There's a punishment, there's a reward. The innocent cannot be punished, the guilty cannot be rewarded. Or the whole humankind will be pushed into the regress. However, in what I have been talking about, you obviously can see still the European frame of mind. So, this thinking of the left wing and the right wing is obviously the European thinking. It has been accepted for some reason, perhaps the British Empire, by the whole world. But essentially, this is the European thinking of politics, going back to the French Revolution. If I learned the lesson I could see on TV well. think of the war and you think of Hitler and Stalin, we are educated to think of Hitler as the right wing, extreme right wing. We are educated to think of Stalin as the left wing. But this is not true. And how can we, if we have the very name Nationalsozialismus, how can socialismus be a right wing? So what is really the right wing? Then we have the American thinking, where we have the right wing also. These are, those who have made black men slaves. And the left wing, those who have given the black man freedom. Well, is that so? Is this really, we need to get out of the package. What we have in Europe with the European Union and the ode to joy is the question of the ultimate solution not being defined really. The ultimate solution having to do with the extermination of Jews and Romans. From what I have read, the Polish people were to be next. One must ask oneself a question. Isn't it about some royal genes in those particular ethnic groups? So is it really the left wing that strikes at the nobility and royalty? Is that what Hitler was about? Excuse me, I consider all calls from my mom urgent. So basically, we have to consider that perspective, where Hitler and Stalin are more or less the same, with their specific national characteristics, of course. As I said, a new perspective is also needed when we think of Russia and Putin's or the party decision to restrict the execution of law in Russia, the law having to do with the human rights, to the Russian constitution. Because with the new perspective of the LGBT movement coming into power and trying to establish norms that are totally unacceptable in other countries, or the countries that are under the American, is it the American rule? We can see how this move that seemed pretty much to be totalitarian can be viewed as the freedom measure. I do not want my children to think that sex is a matter of choice. Perhaps it is on the high spiritual level because we get born as babies. Do the spirits make the decision? I don't know. I am a woman and I have never had any doubt about it. I lived in perfect harmony with my body. Now my body is totally damaged. And this is the LGBT movement that is behind. And we need to ask ourselves this question. Is the gay rule not after getting rid of all women? Generally, I consider the movement a crime against humankind. And perversions are numerous within the ranks, including pedophilia, of course. I want to leave this question of the ultimate solution, that is the extermination of Jews, Romanists, perhaps all the royal spiritual presence. How can you exterminate the spiritual presence? That's a good question. Hanging in the air. Generally, the French Revolution is viewed as the crime from the perspective of the Agnipolitanian Court of Law. Now, it needs to be looked into, of course, but on the whole, it is viewed as a crime. The noble queendom of Agnipolitania is monarchy, of course. It is a monarchy, and it has nothing to do with the left-wing thinking. I, Agnieszka Justitia, the first of Agnipolitania, the queen, am not related in any way to the prostitution or fashion world. I must create my own designs one day, but I will never ever have anything to do with prostitution. And apart from other problems and problems of the legal nature concerning the world of prostitution, there is another case that the world will face. If we take the perspective of the whole world taken to this court of justice, then obviously we have the case of the Roman Catholic Church, pretty murderous. We can read the record of Jerusalem after the Christendom entered. The blood reached the level of the knees. Overall, we need to have the spiritual level perception of the law. So we are talking about spiritual rights now, and the spiritual law. And part of the spiritual existence of life, a part of this existence are animals, where the American case starts, obviously. That is the conflict between Amerindians and the invader. We must know how the United States originated and never forget it, because this tells us everything about the innate nature of the people. Animals in this ontology are viewed as spiritual beings, and the case against the world of prostitution needs to be formulated. For instance, the case of the black leopard. This is a sacred animal. The starting point, of course, is my own case. So my name is Agnieszka Beata Magdalena Rojek. I was born in Poland, in Krakow, on the 27th of September 1974, as the daughter of Bronisław and Barbara, now the Queen.